Welcome everyone. Welcome to Kitchen Table Creativity. I'm Donna Leffler, and today we are going to paint these whimsical, colorful, amazing shells in my Scandinavian folk art style. So these shells aren't really supposed to look realistic. They're supposed to just be fun and colorful. And so you could paint these just for fun. You could paint them to remind you of the beach. You could paint them maybe on a card so that you could give it to someone who loves the beach. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this image. So let me really quickly go through the different supplies that I have. And just to let you know, today I'm actually trying out a new camera, a new overhead camera that I have. So hopefully everything will go well with that. And let me know if you think these are better than maybe some of my other tutorials. Leave me a comment if you will, as far as just the stability of the camera and the clarity and that sort of thing. Okay, so to get started, first of all, I have my image here. And I always, as usual, like to trace. And so I have a printable PDF file in the description so that you can click on that, open it, and print it out. I like to cut it down to a small size to fit my paper so I can easily center it on the page. And totally nothing wrong with tracing. You know that I love to trace because it just gives me a big head start so I can get straight to painting. So from left to right, I have a scrap of watercolor paper, and I use that so that I can test out paints if I need to, make sure that the right consistency. I have a paper towel that I use for blotting, and I have a spray water bottle to spray my paints. I'm using the Daniel Smith Professional Watercolor paints. You can use whatever kind of paints you have on hand. You do not have to purchase these. But I have created this Daniel Smith Heart and Home palette, and I'm planning on using this the entire year for the rest of the year. So the 5 colors that I've picked for right now are going to take us through the summer. They're very beautiful summery colors. And so the colors that I'm using are this coral, the yellow, and this sap green, and then this beautiful aqua color, and then I'm using this purple. And so we'll be using that for the next couple of tutorials at least until the end of the summer. So again, you don't have to rush out and get Daniel Smith paints, but I will put links to where I've purchased them to Amazon in the description, and I'll put the names of them so that you can get them anywhere. And then I have my watercolor journal, which I've been doing pretty much every tutorial. And I like to have a journal. This one is spiral bound. Just helps me keep progress. And if I do want to take this out of here, I can use this perforated edge to rip out the paper and use it maybe for a card right on the back, frame it, whatever I want to do with that painting. Now I have a stylus here and I have graphite paper. So the graphite paper is black on the other side or dark gray. And so what I'd like to do is just put the image after I print it out like this on here. And then I use the stylus to trace, but you can use a pen, a pencil, probably even the end of a paintbrush or any kind of pointed object like this to trace. So I already have my image traced and ready to go here. I also have this new ceramic palette that I got off Etsy, and it looks as if it's handmade. I really love it. So I'm going to be using that today. And I have 2 brushes that are round tips. They're very small. One is a size 2 and the other is a 0. But again, you can use whatever brushes that you have on hand. I have 3 jars of water. I always like to have extra water because that way I can not have to keep getting up and down, and my water stays clean when I have 3 full jars. All right, then I'm going to use these pens. I'm going to use a 05 and a 005 micron black permanent ink pens. And then this is a Sharpie, and this one is a Uniball. These are 2 white pens that I'm going to use for detail work. And there is a lot of detail in this image today. So I am going to be using most likely the white and the black pens. Okay, so to start out, I'm going to start out with my little bit bigger brush. And I already have my paints with water on them, so they are ready to go. So I'm just going to come over here and wet my brush. And today I'm going to start with the yellow. And as always, I say it's good to start with the lightest color. So I'm going to start with my yellow. And I'm going to paint just with this yellow color, this center shell to start out with. And I'm going to keep it pretty bright and pretty watered down. The Daniel Smith professional paints can be very intense in color because they're professional paints. They have a lot of pigment. But I do want to warm this up a little bit. So once I get my coral on my palette, I will be mixing it ever so slightly with the yellow to add another layer. But to get started, I'm just going to paint the whole entire thing here with that bright yellow. Okay. Rinse my brush. And now I am going to go to the green. And I really don't want this sand dollar to be a dark green. So I'm going to add a lot of water first of all. And then I'm going to add just a touch of that to this yellow. And I'm going to create more of a lime green instead of the dark green. And I want to keep the center flower kind of looking thing that's on the sand dollar white. So I'm not going to paint that green. I'm just going to paint around it. And for this, if you feel like you want to, you could switch to a smaller brush. But I'm going to stay with the little bit bigger brush and just use the fine tip to get into the smaller areas of this sand dollar. And as always, don't worry too much if you go out of the lines. Totally fine to just relax and have fun with this. This is an especially fun project because it's just so colorful and simple. So if you go out of the lines, a couple of things you can purposely make it look more whimsical by going out of the lines. And then when you use a black pen to trace around it, makes it look really beautifully homemade. So don't worry so much about it being perfect and having to keep within perfect lines. Okay, so I rinsed my brush really well and put this coral color. And so I'm gonna, again, water that down a little bit. This is why I like to have 3 jars of water so that you can make sure to rinse your brush really well in between different colors. And so again, I'm going to start with a quite watery coral, and I'll probably end up darkening it up a little bit with another round after I do this first layer. And I really want to keep this swirl that's in the middle white also, so I'm not going to paint the middle swirl on this shell. And like I said, I will be using the white paint pens also to add some detail. There's a lot of little detail in this piece. Not as much painting today as detail. And that to me is really a big part of the fun with this style, this Scandinavian type folk art style, because there's all these cute little things like hearts and dots and dashes, and it's really fun to paint. And as long as I have this color, I'm going to darken it up just a little bit while I'm at it. And in this composition, you don't have to worry about shadows or making anything look realistic. This is purely for fun today. And I wanted to do shells because a memory came back to me of going to Florida from Michigan, where I grew up with my family when I was pretty young. I think I was about 10 years old. It was the first time I had seen the ocean. And my mother actually lived in Florida. Okay, I'm rinsing my brush really well. When she was a young woman. And so she loved Florida. Okay, I'm going to go to the blue now. It's beautiful turquoise. I love this color. Very summery and beachy looking. And for this shell, I'm just going to leave just a tad bit of white on the inside edge here. So yes, my mother loved the beach and really wanted us to see the ocean because she lived there for a while in Florida and she really loved it, but she just couldn't make ends meet with her, I guess, her financial situation. I don't remember exactly what she did for work back then. She moved with some girlfriends, and so she couldn't wait to show us the beach, and we went walking together, me and my two sisters with my mom, and looking for shells. And I remember we didn't really find any shells, so we ended up buying some at a store, which was totally fine. But just the experience of that was so wonderful. And so I kind of wanted to relive that in my painting this today. And what I'm going to do here is just leave a tiny bit of white on the edge. So that's the kind of thing, that's what painting and art in general and creativity can do for you. Depending on what you're working on, it can bring back beautiful memories, especially maybe you have a photograph that you're working on. Maybe you have an image that really makes you happy. It's very therapeutic. All right, and rinse my brush really well again. And now we're going to go to this beautiful purple. And this is very dark. Again, going to water it way down. And a lot of times I do like to test my paint. I think that is good. Now for the starfish, I'm not going to worry too much about trying to keep it any white areas because I'm just going to use the white paint pen for this. So tonight I have my free paint along on Zoom, and really looking forward to that. We're going to be painting a whimsical bird, very fun with some flowers. And I plan to do these paint along free little workshops every month. So if you are interested, I will have another one next month. You could probably, if you're seeing this, well, actually, the workshop will probably be over by the time I post this video, but for this month, but you can always sign up for next month, and I will put a link in the description so that you can do that if you are interested. I would love to meet you and have you paint along with me. It's going to be fun. And you don't really have to worry so much about everything being perfectly even on this. It's good to have some variation. Like I put the light and darker shades of blue. I don't know if you can see it very clearly on here, but it's not completely even in color. And so I'm going to kind of do the same thing now with this coral. Just add a little bit of interest to this shell, a little bit darker areas. Probably do the same with this, just ever so slightly. Don't want this to be really dark. This is where it's good to have a paper towel also to kind of, if something comes on a little bit too dark, you can blot it. And I kind of just want to make this so it's not perfectly even. Add a little bit of texture. And then, like I said earlier, I'm going to take the yellow and I'm going to mix it with this. And again, water that way down. I'm going to make this very, very thin. And put some on this yellow. And I just wanted to kind of break up this solid yellow a little bit with a little bit warmer color. And you can see how this is pretty dark. So I'm drawing my brush on my paper towel and just kind of lifting this a little bit so it's not quite as dark. All right. Last thing we have here are the little hearts. And I'm going to switch to my smaller brush for that. Wet my brush and go in with the purple. So I'm not sure how you got to watching this tutorial on YouTube, but if you have not signed up for my Creative Heart Journal, I do a journal. I create it once a week and I post that. I actually create a flipbook magazine kind of little publication and I email it. And so it's totally free. It's something that you would like to get every week on Friday. I send it on Friday so that people can have time to maybe do some fun painting on the weekend. And I have little stories in there. I have the story of my mom and the beach in there, this next publication. And it's really purely for fun. So the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the small brush I'm using that I just used, and I'm going to wet the end of it, not the brush end, but the other end. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to dip it in this blue paint. And I'm going to kind of practice making dots right now on here. See how it's much easier to make little round dots in this way. So get your paint wet, put it on the end of your brush. And I'm going to do that instead of trying to paint these little dots. And I'm just going to kind of randomly put them here and there for fun, sort of like fun confetti is what it reminds me of. And so again, rinse that really well. And I'm going to make sure that it's clean to get it in the next color. And it's yellow, so I really want to make sure this has a lot of water in it, spraying it. And because that blue is kind of dark, I want to make sure it's really clean. And when I'm doing this, I like to test it on the paper to make sure it's the right consistency before I put it on my work. Same thing, rinsing and wiping it off. And let's do the red now, which is actually not really red. It's more of a coral, but it's pretty dark when it's pure, the pure color. Okay, rinsing. Wiping off the end. And let's do the green now. And I'm not going to do purple because I have the purple hearts. Let's see. Okay, I like the way that that's turned out. And the next step, I'm just going to clean this while I still have it wet so the paint doesn't dry too much on there. The next step is to take your micron pen and you want to make sure that your work is really dry. And so I'm actually going to wait a couple minutes here and turn my camera off and come back when these dots are dry because I don't want to mess them up. They are very wet right now. And because they are clumps of paint, it's going to take a bit longer for it to dry. Okay, so I'm back and my painting is very dry now, and it's good to test it just to make sure, because when you use the pens, you don't want it to even be a little bit wet because sometimes your painting will start to smear. So I'm going to go in now with this Micron 005 size permanent black ink pen. And this is what's called watercolor sketching. And I really love to do this. It's sort of therapeutic to just kind of trace the outline on the pencil lines. And it's good to have it so it's not really heavy, like just use a light sketching motion. And I do this because, for one thing, like I said earlier, you can fix any kind of mistakes very easily, but also because it just really makes your watercolor pop. It just kind of takes it to a whole nother level. And after I do this outlining, I'm going to go back with the white pen and add some more detail, but start. And if I had this, if I was just painting this without the camera on, I would probably be rotating my paper to get to the different areas a little bit easier. But because I have the camera on, I don't want to have it be at the wrong angle. So I'm just going to keep mine straight. So another thing with tracing, I was thinking, if you don't want to trace, you don't have the means to do that, totally fine. You could hand draw these pretty easily. But even to hand draw a circle, unless you're really good and you've practiced a lot, it's kind of hard to get a straight circle, which is another reason why I like to trace. So I also have a Facebook group for women, and I've had it for many years, and I was focused years ago more on women's health, but now I've realized that a lot of women's health revolves around taking time for yourself. So I feel like because I found this watercolor, and I've done art for many years anyway, but the watercolor especially is just so therapeutic to me that I think it's great to just focus on one thing that really helps you. And for me, that is the watercolor. So I kind of I'm trying to transition that group into, posting our pictures in there that we paint, our work, encouraging each other. And so if you're interested in that, I also will have a link in the description. And if you don't see it, you probably have to click on more, and more will make it drop down and open up all the different information that I have in the description. That took me a while to figure out, so I like to let people know. So now I live in Idaho. I used to live in California, and I figured out that the beach in California is a lot different than the beaches on the east, especially in Florida. Florida beaches are absolutely beautiful and warm water, and the beaches are beautiful in California, but the water is very cold in the Pacific, and it's a little more rocky, so it's not as I don't know, it's not as serene. Or really love the Caribbean also. Warm, clear water and sandy, soft sand in the beaches. So I still go back to California. I've lived there for many years. And I will be going to the beach this year in a couple of weeks. And our family likes to go to a timeshare in Newport Beach. And we meet there and we do a lot of fun stuff together. All right, so I think I forgot to say, it's always good when you're at the end or nearing the end, so that you're going to start doing this type of outlining, to kind of just take a step back at your work and see if there's anything you want to add to. Maybe you want to blend something a little more. Let's see how this just pops now with the black outline. Okay, so now I'm going to go, I think, to this Uniball. I've tried a lot of different white pens, and sometimes they work really well and sometimes they don't. And so I found like this one is pretty good. And then I really like the Sharpie pen, but it comes out a lot more white. So I'm going to start with a smaller one. And I'm going to mainly focus, I think, this on this shell. Just want to add some white dots. That, I think, really brings that shell to life quite a bit also. And I'm going to add, I think, a few dashes to this shell. I really like the way this coral one has turned out. And just a little on the yellow. It's not going to show up as well. Probably use the Sharpie on this one. All right, so now I'm going to switch to the Sharpie paint pen. Pick it up really well. Try going over these a little bit more. And I'm not going to bother going over the white areas on these too much. I'm just going to leave them as is, because if you leave the paper unpainted, it appears as white. So this is working, I think, a lot better on the dark purple. And I might just add a few little dots, hearts. And sometimes you have to go over these because like I said, some of the paint pens work really, really well, and some leave a little bit to be desired. So you might have to try several different kinds, but I really like this Sharpie one for a little bit bigger areas, especially. Fill in this. This is a good time to just kind of take a step back and see if there's any little areas you might have missed something or you want to change it a little bit. But I like the way this has turned out. I think this has just been a super fun. I'm always kind of amazed at how much fun these little simple projects are, because you can finish them in a short amount of time, and it's just really, really fun. And I always like to sign my work. I'm going to use this very small pen, 005, and I almost always put my initials in the right corner and just the year for the date. And that way I can always look at my work, look back through my work, see how I'm progressing year by year. And just a really good way to keep track of things. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or any ideas, maybe something that you would like to see me paint, please post in the comments and click on the more button or the more area on the description so it opens up all the information of all the different links that I talked about. I would love to have you join me with a live painting, free painting class. I am going to be creating a very low cost subscription where we paint more often together, but I'm always going to offer that free kind of intro, just come and check it out kind of class. So you can sign up for that. And please subscribe to my channel if you'd like to get notified every time I post. Almost every single week, I post new fun little creative projects like this one. So have a great rest of your day, your evening, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye now.